Gino, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Welcome on stage.
Thank you.
Welcome on stage.
We always do a little intro at the beginning. So for all the people who don't know OTA Inside, which might be very few, right? Because you're a very global company by now. I remember 8 years ago, we were both very small startups, and somehow you ended up being 3 times or 4 times bigger than my company, which I absolutely don't envy because I know how much work that means. Yeah, but give a little bit of insight, who you are, what you do, etc.
Okay, no, thanks for having us on the call today. So yeah, I'm Gino Engels. I'm one of the originally 3 co-founders of OTA Insight. So we started back in 2012 with a vision to really help the hospitality industry to visualize and leverage its data. So we're going to be talking about quite a bit of that data today as well. And as you mentioned, we've been quite fortunate. Both of us been working very hard. I think now we're very fortunate to be in a position kind of over the past kind of 8 years that a lot has happened. So having access to real-time forward-looking data points have become even more crucial than ever. And we've been lucky to be at the right time at the right place to actually take advantage of that and have a very strong technical team and a very product-oriented team that was, from that perspective, coming into an industry where, and I think probably the people you had on the call here just before me, they also saw that having a really kind of user-friendly approach to data and to visualization. I think that was something that the industry really needed, and we were there at the right time to offer solutions and tools to help hotels with complex topics as like revenue and distribution is a tough matter. There's a lot of data out there. It's not really about the quantities of data, it's about kind of what you do with it and how you actually make them actionable. So we're fortunate to get some of the solutions to market, and I think we've got about 50,000 hotel partners globally now that use one of our solutions, kind of a rate shipping solution, the parity or the distribution insight. And then the latest one is kind of revenue insight, where we kind of business intelligence, where we actually connect to the PMS and visualize that data. So not only external, but now also internal data. So yeah, that's kind of where we are now. And I'm keen to kind of maybe show some data points that I think could be useful for the people out there. So let me start to share my screen here. So I already took you through this part.
Yeah, it's coming up. And if you press on the video camera again, then we can also see you on the camera again because it automatically deactivates. Yep.
Yeah, there you are.
Perfect.
Digital natives here only. That's perfect.
So we kind of got that part already. So I kind of just directly go through kind of the topic I kind of want to talk through today. So
kind of screen a little bit. Is it possible that you put some more light on your screen because it's a bit dark? Is that an Apple you have, or?
It is, yeah.
You should be able. There's usually some light way of if you press on the bar somewhere.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, that's fine. Then.
No, is it? It looks clear to me. Yeah. Good. Okay. Yeah. I'll try to explain as well as I can if it's too dark. Yeah. So yeah, what I want to be talking about today, and I kind of look forward to kind of hear some questions from yourselves or the audience, but talking about hotel supply. So I think lockdowns, the direct impact of that is hotels closing down. So I think an important point for us is to know in each market which hotels are open. So how many of the hotels are open. I think also another one is to kind of know once hotels are opening again, what are the pricing that they're kind of putting out in the market, depending on, of course, how many of the hotels are available. So let's kind of dive into that. Maybe first wanted to touch on a bit more in terms of details of kind of how do we look at the market. It's kind of methodology. So we look at a minimum of about 100 hotels per market. We then look at the next 90 days, the next 90 arrival dates. And we then shop for brand.com length of stay 1 dates. So based on that, we kind of determine whether a hotel is open or whether it's actually closed. So when it's closed, basically nothing gets returned.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of have a look at kind of I looked at Asia Pacific, and I'm going to focus specifically on EMEA and the DACH region today. So what we do, let's have a look at how the situation was, because we do that every week. So every week we take a snapshot of the market to actually see how open are they. And so this was kind of the situation 2 weeks ago. So on the week commencing the 13th of April, we see 4 different markets. So I hope you can see it because it's a bit small, but at the top, kind of the red line is basically Hong Kong. So we actually see Hong Kong already throughout the whole time at about 90% open rate. So they're not that much impacted, and the hotels are just opening as normal. If you're gonna go one level down in blue at around the 60% mark, that's actually Beijing. So Beijing, of course, has been hit since kind of the end of December. So they've been going through the different motions there. And even up until now, actually now today, they're around 60% open rate, and they're kind of gradually in May, that's going to go to around 80%. But this is 2 weeks ago, so I'm just showing you this kind of as a snapshot, and then afterwards I'm going to show you how it is as of this week to see how these things can fluctuate week on week, even for markets that are literally already 2-3 months ahead of us. And then orange one is Bangkok, just to kind of throw in another market. And then the one at the bottom, the purple, is Singapore. So I think Singapore, initially, kind of going back into February, kind of heralded a little bit as a market that really had it under control and that really kind of knew how to try to limit the infection rate. But actually now as well, like we see in April, the lowest section in terms of open rate, around 30%, going up in May, and then kind of going back to normality in kind of June time. So if you kind of fast forward 2 weeks, kind of where we are now, so this is the data as of Monday, you see Hong Kong still open as normal. Beijing, kind of very similar, although they were probably a bit more optimistic in terms of opening more hotels, but we do see that trend towards 60-70% open rate. Bangkok as well, kind of trending towards kind of catching up with Beijing, but Singapore definitely still kind of at that, even for the whole of May, at that 30-40% close rate. So
is there an explanation for that? I mean, what I don't really understand is how come that Hong Kong can be so different to all the other cities? Is there any explanation around that?
I probably need to check a little bit more in terms of kind of what the thinking is mainly, and you'll see it in different markets, well, in Europe, for example, you have similar with Dubai and Stockholm, where kind of certain countries are just basically not putting lockdown measures in place, so kind of the legalities around it. So I think that's definitely the main contributor there. Yeah, I think also just kind of the way there.
It's about if the hotel is open or has availability or not, right? So that simply means that hotels just stay open, but that doesn't say anything about the occupancy rate.
No, correct. That's a very good point. This is not occupancy. This is literally whether they have rates available and whether they are bookable in the market.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
But then it means that, I mean, if hotels in Hong Kong are open, it either means that they don't give a shit and they just stay open. But I mean, there's a running cost to it. So
yeah,
that's. I mean, it's interesting. It's hard to explain, no? But yeah,
that's actually another interesting one, because I'll kind of come on to that point later on. Like, will hotels open because, for example, the lockdown stops, but if there's no demand, and I think that's probably also maybe in some of the other markets where maybe a lot of the hotels could be open, but maybe what's the point if there's no demand? Why would you indeed have the operational cost to take on?
And I mean, when you have more than one hotel from a brand in a city, it doesn't make sense to run both. So then you can shut down one when the occupancy is lower than 50%.
For example,
yeah.
Okay.
So let's kind of go for a little bit in terms of kind of how does it look like for EMEA. So there as well, kind of looked at I think 5 markets that we've got there. And here similar, we see actually Stockholm, as I mentioned, but similar as the trend for Hong Kong. Like they didn't put in place lockdown measures in Sweden. And I think from that perspective, also the hotels were just staying open. And I think in general, the Scandinavian market has kind of relied quite heavily on domestic markets. So potentially for them, that kind of does make sense. The one in purple is actually Dubai. So I think Dubai also managed to limit the infection rate quite well, but I think there as well, a slight impact, but not as much as kind of like some of the other countries. Then one underneath, kind of in blue, is actually Berlin. So you see actually Berlin still relatively open from that perspective. It's around 40-50%. And actually, especially and again, this is data from a week ago. So let's take this from last week, where we actually see, I think, in the beginning of May, significant open rate towards, I think, almost 80, 90%. If you contrast that to the two on the bottom, kind of in orange, we have Barcelona, and then in greenish, you have London. So I think definitely London being the most pessimistic or extreme in general in terms of kind of closed down.
Okay.
Today we
It's quite interesting because they have a hard lockdown.
Well, I'm here in London. It's kind of from a kind of as I say, we're allowed to go out once per day to do exercise in family. You're allowed to go out for your kind of basic essentials like food and medicines, but that's also it. So you're also not really allowed to go and travel anywhere.
And
I think
has to close, or what's the legal situation in the UK? Do they have to close, or is it optional?
Well, there's actually a review on the lockdown in the 7th of May. So they will kind of see kind of what's changing there, and that's an interesting one. You'll see kind of once some of the rates are open. So I think indeed it's actually legally not allowed to be open because you do see kind of all of them closed. I'm not 100% sure what, but I think it's probably down to that because they are all closed. And I think also the majority of the hotels have furloughed their employees, so there's nobody at the property to really kind of open it, apart from maybe a GM to kind of still kind of keep everything under control in the building. But otherwise, there's not really anyone in the building. So. And from the 7th of May, actually there is kind of a review, so it's next week, and you actually see the hotels kind of start opening after that day. But yeah, I think there as well with Barcelona the same. So Barcelona, I think the beginning of May, there's a review, I think the 4th of May, they'll review the situation, and you also see almost everything closed, so below 10% until that period, and then kind of just gradual opening up. And maybe potentially as well from that perspective, I think, whether it's legal or whether it's actually just the cost of running it or keeping it open, where London relies so much on international travel and business. If nobody's going to stay, maybe it is potentially better to furlough people and actually close the hotel rather than keeping it open.
Konstantin, when are your hotels all open, or at Price Hotel?
No, one in Hamburg is open, and we will reopen Erfurt next week.
Okay, and what level of occupancy do you need to open it again? I mean, where do you make your break-even point where you say, look, this much occupancy, I need to be open?
I think we can't reach the break-even point in the next weeks or months, but yeah.
Because we have, I know that when Ralph is coming up later on, he said, I think they think about 30 to 50% occupancy. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to open. So it really depends. Everyone has different running costs, right? But
the break-even is also moving down or moving up, whatever, in case of illegal things and so on. So it's not that easy to answer that question where the break-even is right now.
Okay.
Yeah, but what is definitely open. So I think the hotels for key workers, I think some of the chain hotels got engaged with the government to kind of offer for accommodation for key workers. But the NHS, they are still open. They're contributing to kind of the low single-digit number there.
But Gino, do you see an impact on the price side? So what happened with the prices?
I'll actually, if we got more time, I kind of got a few slides on that as well. Actually, I kind of see how price got impacted. Of course, if they're open. So this is kind of the point I was raising earlier. But we do see a significant price drop, of course, Konstantin. It's slashing rates significantly. So 30-50%. You'll see it in a bit.
50% on average.
Yeah. But I think there as well, when sometimes events get cancelled, I think you'll see later on some in Vienna and Berlin, when actually hotels get cancelled, or for example, with some of the bank holidays coming up and people not being able to travel, the rates are drastically reduced. So here's kind of the point, like fast forward kind of this week, we actually see really the changes, like for example, Spain, where I think it's 11th of May now, the lockdown situation is going to be reviewed. You really see up until then, nothing's happening. So you really see Barcelona now really following the trend of London, almost kind of in lockstep. The UK, as I mentioned, on the 7th of May, they will review. So up until the 7th, nothing really changing. And I think for Germany, it's going to be interesting. I think May 4th was kind of I probably should ask you, is there like an official lockdown until May 4th? In terms of kind of like because there's still about 50% of the hotels open.
I guess this is enlarged already until the 10th of May. I'm not 100% sure right now because they decided today. And
okay, that's probably why.
Yeah, and we were online the whole day, so we couldn't read them.
But
my question is a little bit, when you have a yield software, there's no data what you can put in because the situation is not comparable to any situation before. And normally yield software are based on data, maybe compared to the last year or whatever. So how to handle that situation? What kind of data could I put in my revenue or in my yielding system? Or should I do the pricing manually? What should I do? What's the recommendation?
I think that definitely the revenue management skills are going to be tested, I think, in the coming months, because I don't know how, like, we're not a revenue management system. So from that perspective,
sure.
I think it would be interesting. I don't know if anyone is on the call later today or earlier, how they're tweaking their algorithms to kind of, you're absolutely right. They're kind of, the rules are based on last year's and looking at what the pickup is for your hotel. If both are missing, how do you kind of price? So that's a very good question. And well, actually, I've got a call in a bit later today with Klaus from Ideas. So I'll ask him that question. How they're tweaking the Ideas algorithms
and
to kind of deal with that.
Please come back and tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in your case, I mean, you are obviously doing rate shopping, and rate shopping is always it's good and evil at the same time, right? Because the good thing is it gives you transparency as a hotel.
Yeah.
The evil thing is if everyone drops rates, it puts you under pressure to do the same thing.
Oh, that's exactly, like, I mean, just kind of, this is kind of, I'll come to that, and that's exactly what's happening. Unfortunately, like, people are using our tools like a lot. Like, we see every day, like the drop in usage has been a little bit, like 25-30%, but we see every day still significant usage of people, looking at the data. And like you say, just even though there's not demand, but they're still following the prices of the competition. So it is a bit of a interesting one. And here's kind of some of the key open rates for the cities over the next 4 months. Well, we're kind of already in May now. You definitely see there that Switzerland is optimistic. Kind of June, July, almost everything open. Also Vienna. So it'll be interesting kind of going into May whether that kind of holds. Because there definitely some positive news there. But kind of to come back to the point in terms of how do hotels react. So we kind of looked at exactly the same hotels, same markets, and the visuals that you will see, kind of there's a y-axis and kind of everything in a plus in blue is basically how many hotels have changed their prices versus last week. So it's really a percentage of, let's say, out of 100 hotels, half of them changed the rate versus last week. It will be 50%. And then in red, you will actually see how much they changed the price with. So again, in a percentage versus last week. So I just kind of want to kind of show this view again in terms of May, because May is the main data we're going to be looking at. And I think here, as you see, Berlin's very optimistic. I think Vienna, Austria, also quite optimistic. But London and Barcelona, not really. So if you kind of translate it into what's happening in the market, this is, for example, Berlin, data from this week. So what has happened this week versus the previous week. And we actually see that in general, so as I mentioned again, in blue is how many hotels in that market are changing prices. So even the weekends, kind of, I think that's usually the Sunday where you see less people changing the rate, but you do really see in the weekdays, almost 30-40% of the hotels are changing prices, and up to 50% going into June. And then the significant drops you see is, as that's where I mentioned, more than 50%, because, for example, May 22nd, 23rd, people will likely not be able to travel for the Ascension weekend. Or I think I had to ask one of our German reps. He said there's the German football trophy in that weekend as well. So I think that's probably a bit of a double. Although I thought that would have been announced before, but it looks like that's kind of really only been actioned in terms of price changes last week.
Yeah.
And then going forward into July as well, June, you do see kind of 30-40%
more active and a reduction in price. Yeah. Okay. Gino, we need to move on because we're already 2 minutes over. But in my eyes, that was
okay.
Same thing, more active and more significant price changes. Yeah. So I hope that this is not a downward spiral. I mean, one way or the other, I guess, with low demand, hotels are panicking and reducing prices. I would say maybe wait for the lockdown to end and then see how big the demand jumps up. Because if demand jumps up quickly, maybe you could have sold more expensive. But again, that's the good and the evil about OTA Insight and your right. The data is great and you have all these availability, but you cannot control reactions. And demand is unknown, so that's the tricky part. So use the data wisely, but use it. I think that's definitely the recommendation. To have it and to use it is great. It's going down to the hotels to be wisely about that, right?
No, absolutely. Well, we are working on some solutions around kind of demand pickup and kind of trying to see a bit more ahead of the pricing in terms of looking at top of the funnel data. So looking at kind of where some of the searches are originating from. Business versus leisure, domestic versus international, and that's something I think will be important because people will have to kind of figure that out rather than relying on the more traditional methods of revenue management. So it'll be very interesting to see what's happening. But hopefully we'll be able to turn a corner in the next few months because I don't think it's going to be weeks, probably going to be months. Do we get through this? But no, thanks for having me. Very nice to talk to you again, Louis and Constantin.
Very nice, yeah.
Yes, and
take care.
And all the best to you and your employees, right? And keep the motivation.
Will do. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye.